Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the GM. It is your guy, Boulanger. Up next, closing out the 24-25 season. Let's talk. Although the 24-25 season is not officially in the books, commenced by a Super Bowl winner, 30 of 32 teams have already began off-season work. The conversations will definitely begin to increase concerning the free agency, the draft, cap space, and the moves your team will make in order to be in some type of contention, whether that's contention for your division, contention for the playoffs, contention for a Super Bowl. Each team is going to have a different level of contention based on expectations of what you have in house. And I think that there's a lot of things we can kind of point to that leans into a team being successful, not just my team, the Baltimore Ravens, but a team that's going to contend overall. When you look at the 24-25 season, I think one of the first things you notice about team success in 2024-25 is you must have a quarterback who has an average to above average level of mobility. I think the day of just sitting in the pocket with a traditional pocket passer, the 6'4", 6'5" QB who just stands in the pocket and throws it all over the field, I think those days are diminishing. I'm not going to say that they're going to be gone completely at some point, but they're definitely diminishing. When you look at the top 14 teams in the playoffs, let's start with the Chiefs, the Bills, the Ravens, and also the Texans. All four of those quarterbacks can move, right? All of them can move a pocket. All of them can escape. Some with different degrees of escapability, but all four of those quarterbacks that won their divisions have a high level of mobility to where their legs can get them out of trouble. And even when you look at the bottom three, the Steelers, the Chargers, and also the Broncos, right? When you look at those three teams, all of those quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, Justin Herbert, and Bo Nix, all of them have average to above average mobility, which I think that's what we're noticing more and more, that your quarterback is going to need that because defenses, interior and on the edges, they're just more powerful and they're just faster now. And so you're going to need that escapability. Even when you jump to the NFC, with the exception of a Jared Goff, who can still, get out of harm's way. When you look at the Eagles, when you look at the Commanders, when you look at, I'm trying to think of who's over there, the Packers, the Bucks, I know I'm missing a team, but all of those guys can get out of harm's way if they need to. Now, some, again, with higher degrees of escapability and mobility, but they all can get out of the pocket. And so I think that that's what's going to be needed. I think some of your traditional guys, like a Matthew Stafford, and even, I mentioned Jared Goff, who can still get out of harm's way. I think as you see those two teams begin to prepare for their futures, which may or may not be this year for the Rams, I think you're going to see them take guys with mobility. Now, so I think that's the first thing we can definitely notice for sure. I think when you think about another thing we noticed offensively that your team will need to be successful, you need an average to an above average offensive line. When you look at every team that was in the playoffs, they had an average to above average. There were really no trash offensive line in these playoffs. Again, there's levels to average to above average, and then some offensive lines were elite. The elite offensive lines in the playoffs were the Detroit Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, and also the Buffalo Bills. And not in that order in particular, but they were elite. And then but you had to have some offensive line play that could at least provide some pass protection and then provide good run blocking. And I think every team in the playoffs absolutely did do that. Again, some offensive lines were better than others, but no team made the playoffs this season that didn't have an average to above average offensive line. And when I say average, out of 32 teams, that starts at 16, or actually 15 or above, because you don't want to be exactly in the midway point. So I think that's another thing that we noticed in the 24-25 season. Another thing that we noticed is that in order to truly be successful, you need above average to elite tight end play. I didn't say average, I said above average to elite tight end play. When you look at the teams that were successful in the playoffs, teams that had won at least one game in these playoffs, they had above average to elite level tight end play. The Chiefs, of course, had Travis Kelce. The Buffalo Bills had two good tight ends, Kincaid and Dawson Knox. The Baltimore Ravens, of course, Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely. Regardless of what happened in the playoffs for both Kincaid and Andrews, they still had above average to elite level tight end play during the regular season, because it takes that regular season in order to even get into the playoffs. When you look at the Houston Texans, Dalton Schultz showed up big for the Texans, being a safety valve, had some big catches in the playoff run that they made. And then even when you look at teams like Pittsburgh, you got Fairmouth and Darnell Washington. I can't remember the tight end out in Los Angeles. And Denver didn't have great tight end play, which I think that's absolutely what they will address in this draft. When you go over to the NFC, you got Laporta in Detroit. You have Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia. When you go down to, who was the third seed out there, guys? I don't know who the tight end was in Minnesota, but I know he was pretty good. Is it Hawkinson? I think that's his name, now that I'm thinking about it. The Bucks, I can't remember their tight end, but he definitely was a contributor. And so you have to have above average. And again, in order to be successful, right, you have to have above average to elite level tight end play. And I think you're going to see at least two tight ends come off the board early in this draft. And then offensively, I think the most important thing that we noticed in concert with having that guy at quarterback, of average to above average offensive line play, elite level to above average tight end play, you had to have a running back. When you look at the teams who were successful, right? I didn't say he had to be a 1,000-yard rusher, but he had to be a guy that had solid vision, who could do some receiving out of the backfield, and can also run with power, speed between the tackles. And you saw that, right? Let's start with, again, the Chiefs. Pacheco was playing well. He got hurt. Kareem Hunt came in and played very, very well in this regular season and played well in the playoffs, right? When you look at the Buffalo Bills, James Cook, nothing else to say. He's an elite level running back. Baltimore Ravens, Derrick Henry, nothing to say. When you go down to the Houston Texans, Joe Mixon had a Pro Bowl level type season until he got injured. I don't know if he made the Pro Bowl or not. I think he did. When you go down to Pittsburgh, Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. When you go down to the Chargers, they had a good running game early until J.K. Dobbins went down, and then they kind of went south, but they made the playoffs. And then when you look at Denver, they had a decent run game, which I think they will try and upgrade that position also. When you jump over to the NFC, you had Gibbs and Montgomery out in Detroit. You had, of course, Saquon Barkley, nothing else to say, in Philadelphia. When you get down to, who was that third seed? The Rams. Don't remember who their running back was, but I know he played well in the season. He could do both running and catching. When you get down to the Bucks, good running back play. They had a couple of running backs who played well. When you go further on over there, Washington, who made it to the Final Four. Actually, Final Four. Brian Robinson and then Eckler. So when you look at the running back, I think this was a resurgent year. The running back had taken a back seat, and teams were feeling like and paying like you could get anybody to do this. And a lot of that, I think, was started by the San Francisco 49ers, who just had a rotation of running backs because of injury, and anybody they plugged in, they were successful. Got Mostert paid by the Dolphins because of his success. And so I thought that it was a resurgence for the running backs. I think you're going to see running backs come off the board high in the second round. I think the second round this year, you will see 5 running backs come off the board. And I think between the first and second round, you're probably going to see at least 7 running backs come off the board. And so I think the combine will absolutely push some guys up because of their speed and agility, things of that nature. So I think you're going to see another resurgent type season in the running back category. Now, there's not going to be as many running backs in free agency this year, so you're going to see a lot of teams preparing again for the draft. And so when you just think about the offensive side of the ball, again, to review, we had to have the quarterback. You have to have an average to above average offensive line, you had to have the tight end play. You had to have the running back. Now, as you see, I didn't mention the wide receiver room. Not that the wide receivers are not important, but when you think about the teams that were successful, those other elements were in place and substantial, way beyond what the wide receiver was this past season. Think about it. When you look at the Baltimore Ravens, we advanced and played a close game into the divisional round without Zay, right? Why? Because those other positions were as important or maybe more important than having just that one guy. When you look at the Chiefs, when they got to the playoffs, the tight end position played well, and then it was Xavier Worthy, who kind of put them over the top in the AFC Championship. But it was Travis Kelce's gravitational pull that helped get some of those other guys open. When you look at, let's see, the Buffalo Bills, right? Dawson Knox and Kincaid were seemingly more important than the wide receiving room. Now, does that mean that don't pay your wide receivers? Does that mean don't make sure you get a number one wide receiver? No, that's not what that means at all. I'm just saying the other elements have to become more important before you get outside. At least that's what this past season showed. Even go over to a team like Detroit. Their running game and their tight end play is what accentuates their pass game. When you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, right? That team went from a passing team last season with Jalen Hurts running the ball a whole lot to dependent upon Saquon Barkley's dynamics. And then, because if you pay attention, that's why A.J. Brown was so distraught going down the stretch, because the offense didn't run through him anymore. I mean, you continue to see it, in a whole lot of different aspects. Even when you think about, what's that team? The Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions had a great regular season, but without all those other elements in place, wouldn't have had the season that he had. Now, does that diminish any of the top wide receivers' greatness? No. I'm just saying all of those other positions must be established first. And it's super, super fine if you disagree. I just think that what we saw from this past season, the trenches mattered. The tight end room mattered. The running back room mattered more than the wide receiver position. Now, that's to say like a tandem like what's that guy's name? Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. They did some great things. But having that number one wide receiver without the tight end play, it didn't yield them any real success. Now, they were dominant offensively, super explosive. But if they had a better run game and a better tight end game, they have an ability to keep the defense off the field and their offense on the field. It just seems like having those other aspects of the offense foundational, I think, is more important. Just real quick, let's talk about the defense. I think what we saw this year is you can go young at corner and still be successful. You don't have to have that highly paid, highly sought after lockdown cover guy, because guys aren't really traveling as much as they used to, and like Darrelle Revis and Richard Sherman, and they didn't always travel, but they did travel if they had to. But when you look at this season, teams that were successful, they didn't have that highly paid cover corner. Just look at the teams in the Super Bowl, right? The Kansas City Chiefs flipped their outside corner, L'Jarius Sneed, from last year to the Titans for some picks, and they still ended up in the Super Bowl not having that highly paid corner. Even when you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, yes, they have Darius Slay, but he's not a $20 million corner. I don't think he doesn't make near that unless his new contract says something different. But they went out and drafted 2 rookies and they balled out this year, right? And so I think defensively, what was important this season is good safety play and having an edge rusher that can go get his own. I think that when you look at teams that didn't have that number one type edge rusher, those teams struggled consistently to get off the field. When you look at, for Ravens fans, we don't have that number one edge rusher. Yeah, I know we have two guys, I think, that got into double-digit sacks with Calvin Noy and Odafe Owe, but they don't really go get their own. They're more or less guys who get chased down sacks. They're more guys who get coverage sacks. They're more like the guys who the interior pressure causes the quarterback to move into a sack. You know, they're not really just beating their guys and collecting those sacks. And so when you look around the league, I think that's one of the things that you notice about teams who had success, is that you have to have that go get it type of pass rusher. Like when you look at the again, the Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles, the Chiefs got Chris Jones, which makes George Karlaftis better, right? Now Chris Jones makes everybody on the defensive front better, but he makes George Karlaftis better. And he had his best game in the playoffs with 3 sacks in the divisional round. When you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, Jalen Carter is basically unblockable at this point in his young career, and he makes everybody along that defensive line better. So you have to have that guy. So teams, if you want to be successful in the 2025-2026 season, encourage your team, right? Make some noise. Your team needs edge rush, good safety play. Your team is going to need an average to above average offensive line. If they can become above average, that's what you want. And encourage your team to go get a tight end. And if you don't have a running back, this is a draft that's full of running backs, and you'll be able to get your running back of the future in this draft, I think, in the top 3 rounds. So listen, man, that's what I think. Let me know what you guys think, man, about what you learned from the 2024-2025 season and how your team can be successful next season. In fact, if you're not a Ravens fan, drop in the comment section who you are a fan of and how you believe your team can get better. I'm out.